This is our second Practical Knowledge Series panel of 2021, and today we're going to focus on location. We're going to talk about identifying the right space for your life sciences startup, and we're talking today a lot about the very early stages, the incubator spaces, but also things that follow on there, things as you are ready to move out of an incubator and grow your business. What should you be looking for, and what does the regional marketplace for spaces such as incubators and life sciences laboratory wet lab space look like? So we have a great panel for you today. First, our sponsors, MVM Associates, Suzanne Raviz, and University Place Associates. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of our panelists today, Anthony Maher, is the founder and president of University Place Associates. A little bit about BioStrategy Partners. We have been around for about a dozen years now, and the idea is to advance commercialization of discoveries in the life sciences, and we have two sort of cornerstone programs, if you will. One is our Germinator program, where we partner with folks in industry they express their needs, their strategic needs to us, and we float those to our consortium members. We have 7 members in the consortium right now, and the idea is to put a little bit of money and a little bit of time. When I say a little bit, we're usually talking about 6 months and roughly $60,000 to understand if there's a there and knock out some early stage risk, and then move things along very often to an industry-sponsored partnership. We also have this Practical Knowledge Series. The idea here is to ensure that folks who are interested in this space, entrepreneurs, technology transfer officers, academics who might be thinking about a spin out or want to license their technology, we help them understand what lies ahead and ensure that to the extent we can, we're helping them mitigate risk and avoid mistakes. Our speakers today, I'm going to really encourage them to introduce themselves. They can do certainly a better job of that than I could, but we have Anthony Durante, we have Tim Conrey, and we have Anthony Maher.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Durante. I am with the Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Northeastern Pennsylvania. So I am not part of the Philly Ben. I am upper northeast corner of the state, basically Jersey border to about Walnut Port, and then New York border down south to right the Bucks line. That's our area up there. Really excited to be with Tim and Anthony today. So I'm gonna start with Tim. Maybe you can give a quick 1-minute introduction of who you are, what you do.
Yeah, my name's Tim Conrey. I'm with Scheer Partners. Scheer Partners is probably about a 30-year-old company that specializes in what we refer to as scientific research, real estate needs, and represent clients and tenants and landlords up and down the East Coast and in multi-market searches. And I opened up the Philadelphia office as of June 1.
Great. And Anthony Maher, introduce yourself, please.
Hey, thanks, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Maher, president of University Place Associates. We're a development company based in University City, focused in University City. Our current project that's more front and center is 4101 Market, where we're building a 250,000 square foot life science building, LEED and WELL Platinum. My former background as the CEO and founder of Benjamin Desk, which was a co-working company that grew pretty fast in the Philadelphia region. We wound up managing and operating the University of Penn's Incubator Innovation Center, and also growing our reach throughout the Northeast corridor, eventually merging with 1776 Incubator in Washington, D.C. that was backed by Steve Case and Revolution. So I'm thrilled to be on the panel and talk to you guys today.
Great. So we're going to spend about 35 minutes with a few kind of preloaded questions that our team talked about here last week or the week before, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, because that's probably the best part of these kind of panels, is you get to talk, you get to ask your own questions and learn about the things you want to hear about. So to start with, great incubators, probably the more successful ones, aren't just about real estate. They provide a lot of different programming to support entrepreneurs. So I'll throw it out to Tim and Anthony. Can you talk about maybe 1 or 2 programs that you guys have done at incubators, and maybe something that really was super successful that the entrepreneurs really enjoyed working on?
I'll let Anthony, he was in the forefront of all this many years ago, so I'll let him start off on that.
Yeah, it's a good question, Anthony. I think it really gets to the heart of separating incubator from real estate and incubator from programming that helps companies grow at the end of the day. My sister, Jennifer, is the CEO of 1776 now, so we kind of eat, sleep this conversation all day long. And when I launched Benjamin's Desk, we were really good at community-based co-working, and we learned that there was a lot of soft incubation needs out there, right? How do you help the companies grow? How do you connect the person down the hallway to help that person to grow? What other access and resources are needed? And I always look at the programs when I talk to the entrepreneurs and folks that are looking to grow and scale. There's usually 3 buckets, and the order changes, but bucket 1's always capital, right? Bucket 2, customers. Bucket 3, strategy or talent, however you want to look at it. And so we took those 3 buckets and we would build programmatic infrastructure around them. Capital stack is where we would bring in high net worth individuals, VCs, angels, family offices, syndicate groups, and we just expose the entrepreneurs at that stage to the different types of capital that exist. Before we jumped on this panel today, we were talking about SPACs, maybe a new vehicle that exists for certain companies to grow and scale. So I think that capital is a bucket that can be unpacked in a really thoughtful way, because not everybody is ready for a VC or institutional round, but they could be ready for a family office or an angel round. And it's just educating groups as they grow. The second was really around customers. So public and private relationships, how you bring them to the forefront, how do you address their total addressable market around, are they B2B, are they B2C, B2C to B, and what are the ways that as an incubator you can connect dots. And at the end of the day, it's great to have access to guys like Anthony and Ben Franklin and their network, but at the end of the day, the incubators that can allow for entrepreneurs to help other entrepreneurs and manufacture that type of engagement, I think grow, and they grow at a really strong rate, and they learn faster. How fast are you getting faster? And that's when as much as I would build a team and infrastructure around the programmatic aspects of incubation, it was always, can you create the type of entrepreneur to entrepreneur engagement that adds speed and adds fuel every single time.
Yeah. Would you like to add to that, or
yeah, sure. We've when you look at the incubator, the successful ones, they always seem to either have an academic backing to them, or maybe a government or quasi-government backing to them, because again, they're difficult from a pure real estate play to make sense. So the incubators that we've run mostly down in the DC area have been either in conjunction with county government, or for example, we ran with Johns Hopkins. And Anthony's right. I mean, capital is important. When they're in the early phase, and I just think back in my days at NIH when I was doing research, they all like to collaborate, even though they might be doing research in different areas. All the researchers like to talk, and they really kind of feed off of each other. I think one of the things that Scheer Partners did well down in the DC area is that when they ran these incubators, they also fostered opportunity for speakers to come in. And I know, Anthony, you did that even at Benjamin's Desk before it was just before you were focused on life science, to bring in expertise in areas such as capital and strategic planning to help people think and kind of get ahead and kind of and catalyze their growth. What I hear a lot when we were up at the PA Biotech site, there's a lot of help that they look for in terms of writing grants. Now, I don't have specific experience with that, but it sounds like it takes a lot of time. And I know that my daughter, who does research at CHOP, they have grant writers, and apparently it takes a lot of time. So that seems to be something else that people look for when they want to be in an incubator space. And then you get into like shared equipment and glass washes and things like that. But it always seems to be tied to either a government or a quasi-government or an academic setting that these really seem to grow and start to spin out from.
That's great points there. I absolutely agree with everything that was said. I think that connection from that connection to customers is huge. I know at the Ben Franklin up here, we do our best to work with the university and with some of our local health systems. We know the folks there who are in charge of innovation, and they seem to be receptive to our companies doing some early pilot stuff, which is great. But that entrepreneur to entrepreneur connection, I think, is huge. I think really fostering those connections, getting them to work together, just share ideas. I think that's probably one of the bigger hidden benefits of being in an incubator. Tell me what you guys think. What are some of those hidden benefits of belonging to an incubator, belonging to an accelerator, that maybe go beyond the programming, the space, the connections to investors, things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, so kind of specific to that, you kind of make the assumption that all these different companies know what everyone else is doing and they're up on the latest technology. We're getting ready to sign a lease down at the Curtis Center with a group that's coming out of the University of Pennsylvania's engineering school. It'll be their first spin out. And I introduced them to another client of ours, Imvax, that we put into the Curtis Center. And it turns out that this company has a technology that Imvax is going to be able to capitalize on. And so all of a sudden now you've got, it's more like an accelerator from the standpoint that this user is about 5,000 square feet. And now all of a sudden in the conversations along with the product that he can offer, it spills into, John Fury and the people at Imvax saying, well, did you talk to this capital source? And now they're helping him with capital. And now not only does he have a potential client, which is going to make the owners of Curtis feel a little bit better that they've got a pre-revenue company that's actually growing, but it also creates a big relief from the standpoint of the company that's coming in to getting further justification, because the challenge from a real estate standpoint is, unlike a law firm that has a head of real estate or companies that have heads of real estate, these companies they've never done a real estate transaction before. So they don't know what they don't know, but they're all clearly very smart, right? And so to be able to help them in some of these different areas and point them in direction, I think is something that like an accelerator can do, or any building that's really going to be focused on life science.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. I think that's really good, Tim. When I think about the hundreds of examples I can bring up around the entrepreneur to entrepreneur, the value from, looking at term sheets together, right, and saying, hey, I have a seed stage term sheet, and this term is in here, and comparing terms and looking at different ways things are structured. When I look at, some young companies have a marketing expert in their small team, and how they can share and leverage best practices around marketing. My brother Mike was the co-founder of Benjamin's Desk with me, and when he launched Benjamin's Desk, as we launched Benjamin's Desk, he had another idea about a spin out called Hauser. And the first team that he went to around his fundraising and his idea was the community of entrepreneurs that we had in our space, and they were able to punch holes in his thinking early on, and the groups that have already raised that round were adding value. And as much as it was access to the VCs, the Josh Koppelmans of the world, the Ben Franklins of the world, and the syndicates of the world, it was the entrepreneurs that went through the ebbs and flow of that stage that mattered. And as we identified these things happening and the value that was being exchanged, as a leader of an incubator, an owner of an incubator, I would start identifying the entrepreneurs that were a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more willing to say, I'll give you a half hour to somebody. And I would ask them to come on board. And I said, hey, I can't pay you. The incubator model, if you're really doing it for the entrepreneurs, it's not there to make a huge profit. It's there for a platform, and it's there to launch and grow companies. And so I would go to these entrepreneurs that stood out and say, hey, why don't you be my EIR? Come in-house, be my entrepreneurial resident. Your membership fee is now free. We're going to see how we can support you. But more than anything else, they have to have that quality and that characteristic to be an entrepreneurial resident or a mentor, an advisor. And that's how we, a small family-owned company like Benjamin's Desk kind of grew into 1776 as an incubator, helping companies grow. It wasn't through our own intellectual capacity. It was through the intellectual capacity of the entrepreneurs that we were surrounded by.
Right. That's awesome. So,
if I might, we have a question from the audience that's relevant here. Todd asks, how important is it to go to an incubator that has room for your company to grow?
That's a great question. Actually, it was kind of segues into our next question, as well as kind of picking a space. I think you have, so as far as tech ventures up by us in the Lehigh Valley, we're pretty close to full. But we're probably, as space empties out, so incubators, clients turnover, that's the goal, right? You bring a company in, you get it started, get it kind of self-sustaining, and then you get it out into the community and into its own space, and you do this process over and over. I think we're probably a little bit more preferential to our companies that are already in our program. If we have a space that empties out, and I know that one of my other clients is starting to grow and they're looking for additional offices. Those are the people I go to first and say, hey, I heard you're adding 2 bodies. You guys want another office? The one across the hallway is open. And I'll let those guys jump on it before I kind of do some biz dev work and go out to new companies. But I think the spaces that are more full are probably the organizations that are running better programs and have a good reputation in the community. Tim, I don't know how you feel about that question.
Well, I think that is a huge challenge for the company, but I don't, when you're in an incubator, your needs are more, I need a bench or 2. And it's not that unusual to not be contiguous, especially if you're in an academic setting. So, they're accustomed to having a small lab in one location and then running down to a lab in another location. And then maybe there's a central shared glass wash, or maybe there's a storage room where they can, that's run by like a company like VWR, where they can buy beakers and whatever they need. So they're used to that not being contiguous. But in the next phase of growth, there's a certain amount of efficiency that they need, and they start to want to be together. And as their intellectual property starts to become more validated, if that's the right word to use, they tend to want to be a little bit more on their own than distributed in a larger office. But you can't have it both ways, and that seems to be the challenge. That's why, for example, Curtis and others are looking at building spec lab space, because I think Philadelphia is just starting to realize that this growth is here to stay. That companies, these pre-revenue companies, unlike other companies, they don't really go bankrupt. They may not germinate, but their science is usually strong, and so someone else is going to pick up their science. And then, unlike when you fit out office space, when you fit out lab space, probably 80% or more is reusable. So I think now we're starting to get an understanding of how to underwrite those transactions. So what that means is that, you need to know, one of the ways incubators can help these companies is help them plan their next phase of growth. Right. And how, and so maybe they tend to be 2,000, 3,000 square feet. The next jump tends to be somewhere in the 7,000 to 12,000 square feet, and now they're getting out of the friends and family. They're getting a more mature kind of company. And then, unlike the growth of the typical office that might grow some percentage every 5 to 10 years when their lease comes up, companies double in size in 2 years. You know, so to be able to be in a situation where you have the flexibility to accommodate that kind of explosive growth and be contiguous, and like a Spark is in multiple buildings. How do you manage? At some point, you have to manage the real estate side too, and it usually happens when you get some more private equity money in, and now instead of patting themselves on the back that we're curing cancer, they're starting to hear questions like, what's my IRR and what's my return on investment? And all of a sudden, like, you know, it's like, but we're curing cancer. It's like, well, yeah, it's great, but, you know, I want a return on my investment. And all of a sudden it becomes a business at that point.
Yeah. Anthony, why don't you weigh in here?
Yeah, it's a good question from Todd. You know, as Tim talks, and if anybody knows Tim, you know, Tim was always a tenant first leader, right? So he would look at tenants. Hey, bud. He broke in. I got my little 1.5-year-old. He's like, you can break through doors. So apologies for that.
Professional soccer player,
right? He plays like rugby. But you know, as Tim's talking, that question around bringing in that type of expertise early, it's smart just to have a soundboard around understanding your growth. I don't want to throw any bio companies under the bus with an example, but I'll use a tech one. When we were running our tech incubator out of Center City, Philadelphia, you know, there was a big name brand, and I'm sure he would be okay with me sharing this because it was more external. Bob Moore from RJ Metrics. They were like a really sexy brand in Philadelphia for growing, and they grew. They had Ben Franklin funding, by the way. They grew fast. They signed a 10-year lease for a locked amount of space, and they wound up doubling their raise in their next round. And now they were handcuffed with this space, and they need to find a building that could suit their real growth needs as they were building and attracting talent and culture. And you know, that's a lesson that Bob talks about pretty publicly, and I think it paints a good picture where, you know, guys like Tim and Scheer, it's smart to take an office hour for the young companies as they gain traction and understand their growth. What does that mean? Because Tim will be the first one that goes after landlords and developers and says, hey, you know what? No, my client's not taking a 10-year lease. They want a 3-year lease. And by the way, they want a little bit more of a fit out or a turnkey fit out, because Tim knows that they're either going to grow or die. And it's those hard conversations that someone with the right polish has to talk to developers and landlords. Or those deals do not get made. And if those deals do not get made, it's actually a black eye on the ecosystem at the end of the day, if that makes sense, right? So you need this growth space. Incubator space, we have it. We actually need more of it. We have CIC Biolabs in University City that's at a capacity. We're at Pennovation, which is south of the University City, but they're at a capacity. And you have some suburban locations that are doing really well and close to capacity. So what's the next level of space if you're a young company? To Tim's point, they may want to grow into their own suite, their own pod, but they're still growing, right? So they're, you know, maybe raising their Series A and still have an amazing trajectory that they can see or maybe can't see. And so the next stage that I'm hoping University Place Associates does a good job of showcasing is we have space for an incubator, and then we have something called growth pods, where those companies can grow out of Pennovation, out of Biolabs, out of our own Ben Franklin Innovation Center, and grow into the growth pod. But I'm not beating them up to say sign a 10-year lease, because we know they may not be there in 10 years, or they may be totally different than what they look like. And so there's this type of space need. You see it in Boston. Tim knows it well. And I think that's the conversation around real estate innovation and ecosystem and life sciences coming together. And it has to happen much faster in Philadelphia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you that, you know, that's a real shortage of space in our region. Like, we've got the incubators, we've got the little 1 and 2 person offices. And then we've, you know, if you need 50 or 100,000 square feet, I can find you that real easy. But that 5 to 20,000 square foot size space, which is the next step for the folks that are coming out of our incubators and our small companies, that's their next step. And that's the space that's really hard to find. And, you know, I think I'd like to see that kind of, you know, some developers up here take on that challenge. And I think we're starting to see some of that.
And to add to that, though, Anthony, I mean, that's a good point, is not only are they like doubling in size, but the capital needed just on for facilities changes dramatically, and it goes way up. When we looked at Curtis Center for MVAX as an example, they did a BSL-2 lab. They took about 17,000 square feet. They had a fit out that was around $3 million. Well, now a year and a half into the lease, they're expanding into an additional 25,000 square feet. They're adding some cell and gene therapy clean rooms, and that project is about a $10 to $12 million project. So managing to that on the capital as well is very important, and that's why it's funny. You think about it, they're putting a lot of capital and investment into someone else's building. So how do you create the right expectation for both landlord and the tenant?
Absolutely. So lots of spaces down in Philadelphia. Not as many up here in Lehigh Valley, but plenty of spaces. When startups look to kind of settle down somewhere, what are some of the things they should look for in a space, whether it's an incubator, an accelerator, co-working, etc.? What are some of those, maybe not just key elements, but what are some of, and you guys, I think all three of us are in this industry, and we, eat and breathe these terms and these acronyms. What are some of the things that new entrepreneurs should think about as they're picking their space? So feel free to jump.
I'll take a shot at this first, Anthony. It's sometimes in these incubators, it's easy to go very agnostic, right? Because you want to diversify the groups coming into your space. You want to be able to offer, the different type of services and membership options to monetize your space or your incubator. I think looking at some of the leadership and seeing how connected they are. Everybody wants to scale, but scale starts local. Things that don't scale, right? That was a saying for many years, and I think it still holds true today. Do things that don't scale, and I think local engagement and making that right choice early on makes a whole lot of sense. So, give you an example. Let's say there's a group that has a national footprint around their spaces, yet your idea is still evolving, and to choose a space because of its national reach may not be the right way to think, but choosing a space that may help them grow and push their model forward and have connectivity to commercialization leaders like at Temple, at Penn, at Drexel. I think those are the things that allow for better decisions. It's easy to be wrapped up into a marketing package. Again, I use tech because I don't want to throw anybody else under the bus with bio and life science incubators, considering we're going to be launching one. But WeWork is a good example. I remember people would come to our co-working company in Center City, and they would say, well, WeWork offers 50 locations, international locations. And I said, well, where are you at in your business model? And they were still at the MVP stage. And I was like, well, did you know who Anthony Green is, or Scott Niesebaum over at Ben Franklin Southeast? No. Well, we can make a direct introduction there. I'm not sure what Adam Newman can do out of New York City. So it's saying that without like pushing them away through what they're trying to decide. So again, it's a very hyper local point of view that I think a young company, an emerging company, and even a graduate company should be thinking through. And I think Philadelphia, is a great spot for that. There's so many different collaborators and folks that are really good at collaboration. I mentioned Temple Wistar Institute. I've learned a lot from Heather Steinman at Wistar because of her ability to collaborate. Even though they are the first biomedical research institution in the country, they still have the nimbleness to collaborate. And that's the beauty of what we can share, and that's the beauty of Philadelphia, I think, when it comes to the spirit of collaboration that's so important for these young companies.
Tim, you want to add anything, or?
I think again, Anthony, has a great project up on up on the edge of Penn and up in the whole University City area. The companies that are doing lab, coming out of incubators, maybe an accelerator lab, a bulk of their employees are all either PhD students that are studying with whatever doctor is running that lab or, spitting out that company, or are somehow connected into that academic area. And as a result, that's why you see growth so close to the academic centers we have in Philadelphia. So I think that, that what's funny is that this one company that we were representing, they wanted to look at a property out of the city for just a regular BSL-2 lab. And I got there early. And as I sat there in my car, I noticed him pull up with an Uber driver. So I said to him, are you going to Uber out here like every day from University City? And he scratched his head and he goes, yeah, it's going to be pretty tough. And he goes, and most of my employees are going to Uber, right? So they don't have that kind of mobile workforce. They want to be in those urban areas. And that's why I think you see such tight demand. Like the centers are really, really tight. We've got one percolating up down by at Curtis. You got where Anthony is up in that whole west market. You have demand going up. Rents are going up because not every building can. I mean, everyone wants to say that they can do lab. Every building wants to say that they want to convert to it, but not every building can. And it's even getting more obvious as the office market tends to settle down. So I think that what I'm seeing now is it as that becomes a more mature group, we're starting to see manufacturing. And once it goes to manufacturing, that tends to be more of a suburban kind of requirement.
I see Michelle's back, so she must have a good question for us.
A related question. So we've talked a bit about the amenities of the city, but it seems that one of our audience members is interested in learning a bit more about the Lehigh Valley, how you might work with the university and the hospital systems up there. I think that's a question for you, Anthony Durante.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you a lot about that. So the Ben Franklin Technology Partners in Northeast, our headquarters is at our Tech Ventures Incubator. We're right on the Lehigh University campus. So we're very closely tied to the university in that a lot of the interns that work at our startups come out of the university. We know kind of all the heads of programs there. So we know who to reach out to if you're looking for a ChemE or an electrical engineer, or if you're looking for some software people. If you're, we have some companies that need some really high-end equipment. They get to use like electron microscopes and stuff. There's ways to connect to university resources there. And then, our developers in our region, we work really hard to have those connections with the well-established companies, the bigger companies in our region. And we know who the companies are who are open to, running a pilot program with one of our startups. Lehigh University in and of itself is actually running, I think, 3 different pilots with us with 3 different companies in 3 completely different spaces. One's a software cybersecurity thing, and the other one is a company that's doing they're doing some technology that goes on to bike sharing, and Lehigh is going to launch a bike share program on the campus using bikes that have the technology that our startup is working on. The head, we really have 3 big health networks in the Lehigh Valley, being Lehigh Valley LVHN, Lehigh Valley Health Network, and the St. Luke's Network, and then there's the Coordinated Health Network. But we know the head of innovation at St. Luke's, we know the head of innovation at LVHN, and when our companies get to a point where they've got something interesting to pilot, again, they're really receptive to when we reach out and say, hey, would you guys run a small patient study, or would you guys, if we throw a piece of software into your learning lab, will you let your doctors and your nurses poke at it and see what they think? And they're super receptive to that. And that's the big thing about us up here at Ben Northeast, is those are the relationships that we try to build, because we want, I think Anthony Mayer and Tim had made the comments earlier, like, it's all about making those connections. You got to get the companies growing. If they don't grow, they're going to die, and that's not what we're in the business to do.
Anthony Durante, a quick question for you. So as as the demand and the growth in life science in this region accelerates almost geometrically, has Ben Franklin, have you changed the way these companies are pre-revenue for a long time, i.e. they run out of money really fast, right? So
Yep.
have you changed the way you underwrite for those companies when you're making loans? Because that's also a challenge on the real estate side. How do you underwrite a pre-revenue company? Because I'm putting out a lot of money, and what's that going to look like? So have you changed that at all?
I don't know. So full transparency, I've only been with Ben Franklin about 18 months. So I know our current process, and I would say that our current process is pretty thorough in that we will make a series of small investments into a company rather than write a $300,000 or $400,000 check. So if someone's pre-revenue, and then we do, so let me back up 1 second. When we do investments, we do as a loan with warrants, and that might be a little different than the Southeast program does. But we do, it's an 8-year loan, 6% interest, interest-only payments with a balloon payment on the back end. And then there's some warrants for equity that get attached to that. And mostly we exercise those warrants in the event of an exit. Gives us a little bit of payback for being the first ones to throw some money in the pot beyond friends and family. But what we'll do is we do that on a project-based application. So a company that's pre-revenue might come in and say, hey, we need to build our app. And we're like, okay, we'll give you 35, 50 grand. You're going to get the MVP app built, and then come back and we'll talk some more. And obviously we're working with them along the way. So they might get that app built and finish that project, and they might come back and be like, hey, we built the app. We've got our first 500 customers. We're ready to make a big jump on sales and marketing. We need $100,000 to do that. And that might be the next project, and we might invest there. So that's kind of how we do business up here in the Northeast, is we'll kind of increment how we put money into a company so that they can swallow, the commitment to pay us back. And of course, we're forgiving. So, when companies miss a payment or two, we'll go knocking on doors, but we're not breaking anybody's kneecaps to make payments. We understand the companies that we're doing business with, and we understand that they're just getting started and getting up and running. But what we also tell people is, we're funded by taxpayer dollars. We have a responsibility to everyone on this call is paying their state taxes. That's how we invest in our companies, and it's our responsibility to make sure that even though we're making probably higher risk investments than most banks and everybody else, that we're making good choices, and we're picking companies that are showing good signs of life, and that they're going to make a run for it. So I think the last 2 questions that I had on my program, I think we touched on a lot of that stuff already. So Michelle, if there's some questions out there that want to be asked, why don't we jump into that and see if some folks have some questions out there.
That's an invitation to the members of the audience to please go ahead and submit additional questions to the chat. I will start us off though. So a lot of what we're seeing in particular in the growth of incubators, real estate expansion in the nationwide really is life sciences. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you think that is, and why you think Pennsylvania generally and the greater Philadelphia region in particular seem to be so hot right now, really?
So, I'll jump in there as far as our region up here in the Lehigh Valley. I think what we really, we have the spaces for those kind of companies. And, the things that we brag about all the time is that, you're from the Lehigh Valley, you're within a 5-hour drive of 75% of the US population. But our cost of living and our cost to do business here is much lower than in New York City and San Francisco and probably even Austin and maybe even a little bit of Philadelphia. So, we can be a very economical place to start a life sciences or a biotechnology company, but not have you so far removed from the rest of the world that, you're traveling across country to do business. And you're within a couple of hour drive of most of those big city centers.
Yeah, I was going to say Jim Wilson, Carl June, and John Weary. those three guys, at Penn and CHOP, it's staggering what they're able to spin out of their labs and the number of scientists that work under them. So, if I think back, one of the things that amazed me, I always tell people that Reagan knew that I wasn't going to cure anything, so that was the end of my grant at NIH. But what's staggering is the guys that are really good, the ability to keep vast numbers of people busy on projects that are extremely diverse is amazing. And there was a group called the Young Turks down at NIH, and it was all about how many papers, original thought papers, you could produce by the age of 36. Because I think at that time the thought was by the time you hit 36, your ability to think true original thought begins to diminish. So you've got these academic centers that are just pumping out information and coming out with these great new therapies and great new ideas. And so, I always tell people, watch the Ken Burns special called Gene, and in it, Jim Wilson plays a prominent role. And you start to understand the fact that cell and gene therapy, we talk about life science. Philadelphia is the center for cell and gene therapy. And that seems to be on the forefront of everything from immunology to more directed patient autogenic approaches to cures. And that's why you're seeing this explosion in Philadelphia, and we find ourselves luckily at the center of something for a change that's very driven by the people that are here. That's not going to be picked up and transported someplace. I think it's really a fortunate and exciting time.
Great.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. The quote Steve Nichberger from Cabaletta Bio, Philadelphia is at an inflection point moment, and it's all the things from following NIH Capital that's landing here. NIH Capital specific for cell and gene therapies, #1 in the country. The institutions that are being open and collaborative and being available to collaborate. I think that speaks really highly of our positioning and long-term positioning in the marketplace. But and I think Tim did a great job answering it. If I had to go backwards to a question that's important for some of the commercialization teams on here and young companies that are growing up, a good indicator of a bad incubator, or maybe not the right fit of an incubator, would look like just being very transactional around the real estate, talking real estate first, and going back to Anthony Durante's first question around, well, what programming exists? Being a young leader growing a company is hard. The ebbs and flows, and I think no one knows that better than Ben Franklin, because they're behind the curtain and they understand the hiccups, the late nights, the good and bad emails that come probably every hour, right? One good, one bad, or even more.
Oh yeah.
And so those are real. And so if you're a young company thinking about space, look at the leadership, make sure they're talking incubation programming first, real estate second.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. There are days when someone walks in my office and they're high-fiving me because they've landed a big round of funding, and the next person walks in and they're in tears because something fell apart, and it's an interesting lifestyle an interesting industry to work in. Go ahead, Michelle. I'm sorry to cut you off.
I have a question for each of you, because you're at slightly different places along the continuum, if you will. When should an entrepreneur come to see you? And maybe we'll do this, we'll start with Anthony D, and then we'll go to Anthony M, and then we'll go to Tim. How's that sound?
Sure. So I think in general, people would knock on our door anywhere from idea stage to maybe already MVP built and already starting to get to market. A lot of the folks who are at the idea stage, I will probably connect you to other organizations to kind of get that first business plan built, get the MVP built, stuff like that. I think our sweet spot is kind of either just as the MVP is being built or MVP is built, then you're getting the first set of customers and you're ready to start putting in some money into the sales and marketing engine and getting the company going. Life science companies wise, we're dealing a lot more with the pre-revenue folks. We want to know that maybe you have a molecule set up, or maybe you've got a formulation set up that you're ready to start producing and testing, that's probably the sweet spot there on the life sciences side. But you know, if you're early for us, we're going to help connect you to the right resources so that you can come back to us and work with us. And if you're, you know, a little bit later stage, you know, we can you know, work with you a little bit, and then obviously connect you to the folks like Anthony and Tim to, you know, find the right space for you to get the company growing. And we'll probably still find ways to work with you.
I think the short answer is when my building is ready in 18 months.
Yeah.
But I'm also, any friend of BioSP, I'm always open to take a 30-minute coffee. And my two connections I'll probably make immediately: one, my sister-in-law, who's the CEO of 1776, and two, someone that I hired that has been a mentor to me, Carter McClure, the managing director of Pennovation Center. That's what they're there for. That's their role and responsibility, both my sister and Carter, to sit, understand what you're trying to achieve, and connect those dots, and not care as much as how to monetize off you, as much as to make the right introduction and connection, because that comes back to you. And they believe that, I believe that. It sounds maybe a little squishy, but you know, I'm always up for a conversation with any entrepreneur, because I've been there and I understand what it's like to deal with those ebbs and flows.
And for me, you're asking the wrong person, because my background's science, so I get over involved in the science part of it. So I get more excited about talking about things like T-cell exhaustion than rental rates. So, but from a business standpoint, I would say that, you know, that you know, once someone has their own labs, you know, and they're starting to look at making decisions on relocating that lab, whether it's inside of an academic environment or not, because they both have challenges. If you're inside an academic environment, you know, and you've got intellectual property, then you've got to work out license agreements with the institution that you're trying to separate from, and that can be sticky. So it would be even more ideal if you could start to engage people prior to that move, because one of the challenges I always hear that, you know, when companies, as they spin out, they're either still trying to work out their site research agreement or their license agreement with the academic institution, and they tend to not want to let go of that all that easily, right? So I think the sooner the better, and both not only from a capital but from a real estate strategy standpoint.
A question from the audience about investment. So each of you has talked about the investment of time that you make in potential candidates, entrepreneurs. Do any of you folks, or do you know programs where the space folks actually invest in the company itself in terms of cash or rental forgiveness, that kind of thing?
So obviously the Ben Franklin Technology Partners, that's kind of what we're designed to do. We invest in our companies. You can be in the incubator and not take an investment. You can be in the incubator and take investment. You can be outside the incubator and take an investment. So we're you know, being Ben Franklin, putting money into a startup that we're working with is not a requirement. I would beware of spaces that want to do rent for equity. One is that, you know, one is equities forever. It is, once you give someone a piece of your company, it's really hard to get it back. And number two is that it sets up a false bolstering of your company. If you're not paying rent, the expense side of your P&L is off balance, because you don't really understand what it really costs you to run your company. So honestly, rent for equity, in my opinion, and it's just my opinion, is a really bad idea. But maybe Tim or Anthony feel different there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Anthony. I think, again, you can look at it as far as, here's two analogs for you. CIC Biolabs charges about $25.99 per bench per month. An ecosystem pricing, and remember, they're out of Boston, right? And so an ecosystem pricing, look at Pennovation Center. They charge $9.99 per bench per person per month. So there's an attachment to their business model that says we are making that investment in the young company growing. When we launch our incubator with Ben Franklin Technology Partners of Southeastern Pennsylvania in 18 months, we'll have an economical pricing package, because it's making sure that we get to a break-even point, not that we're making money off the entrepreneurs coming through the space. Now, I am all for these incubators that also have cohorts inside their incubator, saying, hey, we're launching a cohort, apply here for an additional layer of rigor and curriculum, an accelerator type model that they're going to put you through a 10-week program that may have a culmination event associated with a pitch competition. And during that pitch competition, those incubators are working their butt off as far as getting the right people in the front row. You know, someone from 5 a.m. and someone from TRV and someone from Ben Franklin, and you know, a couple angels, and they're teeing you up to be successful. I think it goes back to the core programming, and you look at those programming and you see if they exist inside those incubators, and that's where you have to give credit to those incubators that are doing that really well, because it isn't easy to run an accelerator, especially when it has a culmination event with an expectation that there will be capital or capital opportunity if that person or company performs well on stage and shares the right opportunity.
I think that that's what makes this whole thought process is what makes life science so different than representing a law firm or a corporation. With a law firm, as a former tenant rep broker, you know, the landlord was the bad guy, you know, and he was the bank, and you know, and the only reason why he's going to give you money for fit out is because you're going to be paying rent, and you generally use all that money, and you had a budget, you budgeted to whatever the landlord was going to get you, so you exhaust that. And maybe you spend a little bit more on furniture, and then you move into a building, and then you know, you argue about rent and timing of rent and you know, monetary default, non-monetary default. You have those arguments. But with life science companies, I think that when you're representing a tenant or representing a landlord, the landlord is giving you $80, $100, $120 a square foot in TI, and you're a pre-revenue company, they might be able to make the argument that say, I might be your biggest investor, you know, and they want to have you as successful as possible so that they can get their rent back. And oh, by the way, you know, the client or the tenant is also probably matching, if not the amount that the landlord's putting in, but maybe even more than that. You know, so from a real estate standpoint, it's really important that, you know, you approach the process more as an owner investing in your company than as a, you know, give me your money and I'll get back to you and just be happy you're getting your rent, you know. And so that relationship is really important. And then from that, you know, it's equally important because you know, these companies want to grow and they're going to grow quickly. So it's not like I'll get back to you in 5 years when I need paint and carpet. I might be back to you in a year when I need to double in size. And what are you going to do to give me the flexibility to do that? So and then therefore the owner's even making another investment into a company that's still pre-revenue. And what's interesting is, you know, because of the nature of the work of these companies, whether it's cancer or whatever they're doing, there is a moral thought that says, hey, we want you to be as successful as possible. So everyone's rooting for you. It's really an interesting dynamic. And I don't know, I just find it to be you know, we're at a really great time in Philadelphia, and the growth is great. And the only thing I throw in now is throw to Anthony's way is, I mean, he's successful in bringing in a partner from outside the region. So you're starting to see, you know, money coming in from outside our region, really focusing on life science. And it really is going to change the dynamic, I think.
That sounds like a very nice note to end on here, but I suspect that our panelists might have maybe a parting word of wisdom or two here. Would you like to go around the table? If there's any final thought you'd like to leave with the audience before we call it a day?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the other thing, something that we talked a little bit earlier, but when you pick a program, pick a space, I think something to think about is there's a lot of nationwide accelerator programs. You know, they're all over the world. And you can apply from Philadelphia, and you can spend 6 months in Austin or 6 months in San Francisco, and they're great programs. But what happens is you eventually come home and you build this network in wherever this accelerator program is, but then you come home and sometimes those connections stick and sometimes they don't. And a lot of times they don't. I've known a couple of companies who've done, one did a program in Austin, one did a program in Chicago. And they built up these really great networks of professionals and investors and and then program was over, they packed up, they came back to Lehigh Valley, and all of a sudden they started losing those connections because they weren't right there in that ecosystem. So if you're picking those spaces, if you're picking a program, think about where you want your company to be long term. There's lots of things to think about as you pick spaces and pick programs, and just try to find the right one for you. Be patient. And then, if folks have questions for me, I'm going to throw my contact information in the chat. Feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call. Kind of like Anthony Mayer said, I'm happy to give you a half hour of my time to just have a conversation, about anything you want.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'll throw some last words out there. Maybe a challenge, if I may. We have amazing leaderships and commercialization teams, a part of BioSP, right? You have CHOP, Jefferson, Wistar, Temple. My challenge would be a great incubator is only great because of the ecosystem supporting it. And the more stakeholders that support local incubation, greater the entire region makes out, and ultimately the entrepreneur. It's hard. You look at these engagement leaders and these community managers and these directors of incubators, they have a hard job on their hand. They're almost turned on 24/7. Their inboxes are full of challenges and opportunities. And the more thought leaders that we have at these great stakeholders of universities and institutions, I think the stronger we'll be. I can tell you this, Silverstein Properties, the developers who built the World Trade Centers in New York City, and Cantor Fitzgerald, another great investment banking firm that's known globally, they would have never been our equity partner to build 3.0, 4.0, 5.0 if it wasn't for our Wistar Institute partnership. I can tell you that, and with all honesty, that their willingness to be our collaborator early on when we're building this monstrous building, $100+ million, and they said, well, what's going to be in, that's great, the bricks and sticks, what's on the inside of your building? And we finally got to talk about Wistar and what they do and their BTT program and how important that is for the ecosystem and how that could be a heartbeat of our building. And all credit to their leadership, from Dario to Heather Steinman to everybody else in between that helped us put together a vision that allowed outside money to come in to make this thing happen. And I've challenged all the big names and institutions on this call to lean in and see how they can be helpful, because I can guarantee it'll come back to them.
Great thought. Anything else?
I think I'm good. So I have no more words of wisdom. The fact that Philadelphia has a great tradition, and the first hospital was in Philadelphia. You had Sir William Osler, who was at Philadelphia General Hospital, who started the whole idea of internship and using autopsies for medical education. I think that, Philadelphia just has a really deep history in healthcare, and it's great to see it continue in research.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Anthony, Tim, Anthony, thank you so much for your time today. Really great content. We do appreciate it. And once again, thanks to our sponsors, University Place Associates, Cesar Revis, and MVM Associates. We, on behalf of our audience at BioStrategy Partners, really appreciate all that you do for the life sciences community. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, everybody.